Welcome to AlexGs Aquarium, everybody. Today I want to talk about the dogface puffer and the porcupine puffer and the 720-gallon aquarium. These are two of my favorite fish, and I always have had a real love for puffers. They have a great personality. They just have that cute face on them. My wife loves these fish. Now, I don't name fish, but my wife does like to name fish, and she did name these two puffers. The dogface is Dr. Evil, and the porcupine puffer is known as Lardy. I didn't make the names, my wife did. If you got comments on the names, please go ahead and leave them down below. I'm sure that you will appreciate any comments about their names. As far as the puffers go, I'll talk a little bit about their behavior in this tank, some do's and don'ts that I've encountered with them, and just some overall general care tips for these fish. Now, if you're not familiar with puffer fish, they do puff up. They inhale large quantities of water and can literally turn themselves into a little balloon underwater. And it's a defensive mechanism where if they get attacked in the wild, to make them a lot less edible to fish. Now, the porcupine puffer has its spines laying flat along its body. The dogface, while it looks like it has a smooth skin, it's actually very thick, and there's spines underneath that skin. When they puff up, they look like little white needles. I've never actually touched one when they've been puffed up before, so I can't say if they're sharp or not. I can say from the look of the porcupine puffer, their spines look pretty darn sharp, and I don't think I'd want to mess with one when they're all puffed up. As far as seeing them puffed up in the 720-gallon tank, I've seen a few instances where they've tried to puff up a little bit, where they've gotten disturbed or upset, but I've never seen them do a stretching routine where they just puff up. On occasion, I have seen puffers do that in past aquariums when I worked in local fish stores, but for the most part, they don't do it, and I don't encourage anyone to try and force these fish to puff up for entertainment purposes. It is a stressful event for them, and something that they should do on their own terms if they choose to. And if you do watch them a lot, there's a good chance one day you will get to see them do it in your aquarium. As far as other things to consider with these fish, they get big. Now, both of these fish get about a foot to a foot and a half in total size, which is a pretty big fish. They're fairly slow growers once they get larger, but it's something to keep in mind. If you want to keep one puffer in a smaller tank and you want to upgrade them eventually, you could probably start off with a 120-gallon tank. No problem, and they'll be pretty happy in that. Ideally, though, for larger puffers, you should be looking at a 300-gallon plus tank. The 720 here could definitely accommodate both these fish, and they'll be quite happy in it. Another thing to consider with puffers as well is their dietary requirements. Now, these fish love to eat crustaceans in the wild. They'll opportunistically also eat fish if they do have the chance. Unfortunately, the porcupine puffer in here has eaten a couple of fish. It wasn't really its fault. They just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. When I first put the porcupine in, he ate the cleaner wrasse. I'm guessing because he just didn't know what it was. Just got in the tank. It was the first night. I'm sure the cleaner wrasse came up, say, "Hey, let me check you out." And the porcupine puffer probably just said, "Oh, the meal's coming to me. I won't deny myself." The next one was one of my purple pseudochromis. When I very first added them, I tried to get them all into the rocks as easily as I could, as they were tiny, but one of them decided to go up in the top corner of the tank where the puffer hangs out, and I'm about 99% sure that the puffer got that as well. As all the fish are settled in, though, the puffer doesn't really care about them. The puffers both are very much interested when I come up to the tank and have food. And feeding them is a very important part of their diet for many different reasons. The first is their teeth or their beak. Both of these puffers are constantly in the wild chewing on crustaceans and breaking shells and exoskeletons apart to get to that meaty treat inside. Now, I feed a wide variety of meaty foods. I feed the Predator blend from Rod's Foods. I also do the LRS Chunky blend. Both of those are great foods. I also feed a lot in the way of cocktail shrimp, uncooked of course, and partially frozen. And part of that is to try and work those teeth. Now, puffers have those teeth, or their beak, that is constantly growing on both of them. The dogface, it's much more prominent as they have that beak right up front. The porcupine puffer's teeth are just behind its lips. Both of them are incredibly powerful and pretty darn sharp. I've never been bitten by a porcupine puffer, but judging by what it does to a frozen cocktail shrimp that it could literally bite in half, I don't want that fish to grab a hold of my fingers at all. The dogface, I have been bitten by one, and it is quite unpleasant. It did break the skin. Luckily, it was a smaller one. So when you're feeding these fish or doing maintenance, keep an eye on them, as they might mistake your fingers as something they could eat. Get back to food though. The cocktail shrimp, I'll thaw it out partially, I'll put it on tongs, and I'll let them go at it. And one of the important things is to leave that exoskeleton on that shrimp. Puffers eat that exoskeleton, they'll eat bits of shell, and it helps with their digestive system. And it's extremely important that they get that in their diet. So I always keep that in there for their digestive system, and I always feed them those meaty foods to help with their teeth and work them. Another one of the favorite foods I've been feeding them is I go to the grocery store and I get some fresh clams that are still alive. I'll open them up and leave the clam meat on the half shell, hold it with tongs, and let them bite down on that food and also bite that shell to help work those teeth. They have a lot of fun with it, and they're very enjoyable to eat. Now, I do target feed the larger food for them, because if I broadcast feed, my wrasses will go and steal it all away, like the harlequin tusk did in last week's video, which I'm showing here. And I gotta say, that's a little annoying because the puffers get really close to getting it back from the wrasse, and the wrasse just swims away with it. And there's nothing I could do about it. But there's also another reason I'm very careful about feeding, and that is something I've learned with these two puffers. With the dogface and the porcupine being together and having such large appetites, I have unfortunately had 3 incidents now where they have accidentally not grabbed onto food but each other. And in 2 of those instances, the porcupine puffer accidentally grabbed the face of the dogface puffer when they're trying to feed on the same piece of cocktail shrimp or just broadcast food feeding. Didn't hurt the dogface much. Did leave a little line and mark on it where the tooth had bitten down, and the spines of the dogface were kind of sticking out for an hour or so while they kind of retracted. But the last incident, which unfortunately I blame myself for, I had dumped some extra food I had in the tank right next to both of them, and they both went for it, and the porcupine latched onto the dogface, but then the dogface went underneath the chin of the porcupine and grabbed him there. Now, the porcupine has got a pretty wide mouth on it, so it has a little bit more disbursement of the pressure when it bites down on something, even though it has a lot of power. The dogface, on the other hand, has a beak that has a point on it, so it will shear through things incredibly fast and easily. So it did break the skin underneath the porcupine. Actually had me a little worried for about a week there while I was watching both of them to make sure nobody had a wound that was going to become infected. So I was really worried about that porcupine puffer until it healed up. Thus far though, they've been good. When I feed, I tend to feed with a couple sets of tongs, or I will hold food in one hand and make sure I kind of let it just go to a single fish and not both of them. So I try to keep them separated. And if you're going to keep multiple puffers, I highly recommend that you take the food and you separate it and spread it around and make sure that they're not in a situation where they could grab onto each other accidentally. While this last incident was probably the worst, I'm sure if I kept feeding this way, it would happen a lot more often, and I really am concerned about the health of these fish and their well-being. So I keep that food separated now as much as I can to ensure that they both get a nice meal and aren't near each other while they're eating. As far as behavior goes, these fish are both a lot of fun to watch. Now, the porcupine puffer might seem very inactive, especially early in the day, but getting into the evening, the porcupine puffer might be sitting underneath a rock or wedged between a couple rocks. Generally when I get home from work in the evening, the porcupine's still that way. Starts to come out when I feed my first meal shortly thereafter. But in the evening and into the early morning hours, that porcupine puffer is constantly out. They have those large eyes, and they use those to see in the dark, and they navigate the tank, and that porcupine puffer is all over the place in this tank at night and then rests during the day. And because those eyes are so large and they have a lot of fun at night, the porcupine puffer doesn't always go swimming out in the open under the bright lights. So if you have bright reef lighting and you're trying to do an aggressive reef tank, keep that in mind if you want to keep a porcupine puffer. They need a lot of shaded areas. Mine tends to like some of the rock caves and the overhangs, or because I have this big 5-inch Euro brace all the way around the tank, he hangs out in the corners and the sides so he's got a little bit of shade. When it comes to feeding time though, that puffer is out and about and ready to eat, and won't stop until it gets its meal. A dogface, on the other hand, is very active throughout most of the day, a little bit into the night. They have a little bit smaller eyes though, they don't have quite as good a night vision, but that puffer is out for at least part of the night and kind of curls up on a rock and goes to bed. I really enjoy keeping these fish, and I hope some of these care tips and my experiences with them are helpful for anyone out there that's thinking about a puffer or just wanted to see some cool footage of them swimming in the tank. If you have any comments or questions, go ahead and leave them down below. Let me know what you think of the puffers. Let me know what you think about their names. Dr. Evil for the dog face and Lardy for the porcupine. I'm sure my wife would appreciate any positive comments on that. As always, if you like today's video, go ahead, give me that thumbs up. Let me know you like the content. If you want to see more on the journey of the 1600 gallon system, go ahead, hit that subscribe button, and don't forget the bell notification. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and I'll see you on the next video.